2 minutes to countdown. And now we're at 1 minute to countdown. 30 some seconds to countdown. 20 seconds. 15 seconds.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh boy. That was a mess up. Whew. Okay. There we have it. Hello everybody. I got a special treat for us today. We're in game ReEntry. This brings us back into time of the American space flight. Yeah, it's a miracle. The American space flight was not a miracle. It was a lot of hard work and engineering and awful lot of people with engineering efforts. We're going to go into the main menu and hit missions and go Project Mercury, free play, Mercury Redstone, and launch that out. And I'm going to show you, kind of a quick guide to how to fly this capsule. There's a lot of tutorials. There's an academy that you can go through step by step. It's quite wonderful. You learn everything you need to learn to be an early American astronaut. America was not the first to get into space. Russia actually beat us in the space race. But we did have our own program, and eventually we caught up, and we fell behind on several accounts, but eventually in the mid-60s we caught up. But this is 1961, and I think it's July 10th of 1961. We're in the Mercury capsule, which stands on top of an intercontinental ballistic missile, repurposed as the Redstone rocket. Now, you may have the misconception that the spacecraft is nothing more than a container that a dog or a monkey. The Russians put dogs in them. The Americans, we tested this out with a monkey first, or a container to put a man in order to get up into space, and nothing more than going for the ride. And in some ways, that is somewhat true, but not totally true. It is a true spacecraft. It is actually a test craft. So these early American attempts to get into space and successes in space were testing the capsule as a legitimate spacecraft and what can it do. And this flight here, as we go through it, you will see the type of things that are tests. Yes, the astronaut, once he's in the capsule and he sets himself in, he can put things on automatic and just go for the ride. The astronauts themselves were test pilots, and they weren't. A lot of the engineering, that's all they wanted, and the astronauts themselves did not want a vehicle that they sat in and everything was automated. It is good that things are automated. In case you blacked out from G-forces or something, you could safely return home. But there was occasions in the early American historic test flights that things went bad with the automation, and the pilots, having given the control, were able to save themselves and have successful missions. So even in Mercury, we were testing out some of these controls. So this is our rocket for the Redstone rocket with the spacecraft. Now, a spacecraft has to do some things, you know, like an airplane. It has to be able to fly. It has to be able to contain an environment within inside of it. And, you know, it has to have power to do all these things. Here we have, let's go inside and take a look. We have about a minute, less than a minute and a half before we launch, but we have a number of items that we have to do. The checklist basically is going through, making sure all your circuits are here. We're not going to use a checklist because I just want to show you how to fly this thing. You look at these circuits, you check them. You're going to scan these gauges. You're going to test the power. So what's nice is that there's different color codes here. This is our cabin environment and our suit environment and all the things necessary for that. This is our power. This is our emergency, or this is our warning lights, not emergency stuff, but some of it might be warning lights. These are our gauges telling us what's going on, including our fuel gauges, our descent. We do have to let them know we're ready for launch, which we got about 30 seconds to go. We have to arm our explosive things, and that's basically all we have to do. We will get ready in case the clock, for some reason, if the clock fails on takeoff, we want to be able to reset the clock to 0, because everything depends on our flight and testing our flight, that clock being correct. But I don't have this in any kind of mode of failure. I don't have any failure modes set on, so we're gonna have a successful flight. Well, we'll see, but everything should go fine. We're lifting off of Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral. There was a time where the President of the United States had referred to it as Cape Kennedy, but it is Cape Canaveral, and there is a Cape today, in today's day, there is a Cape Kennedy, and I'm sorry, there is a Cape Canaveral, and there's a section of it that is Kennedy Space Center, which, by the way, I used to work at, and I still live in Titusville, Florida, which is right there. So as we descend, we want to watch their abort signal. We want to watch our altitude. This is our altitude gauge. If you can see my mouse, and I think you can, as we climb up out of the atmosphere. And we are also looking at our gauges, and one of the important things is, as we climb up in the atmosphere, make sure that our pressure in the cabin is, you know, at least 5.5 in that cabin pressure. It's hard to see with everything jostling around, but our suit environment gauges are here, and we're taking a look at all that. Our power is fine. And we're coming up, we're looking at the clock here. We're coming up at 2. We're about ready to, yeah, we're at 2 minutes. We're 2 minutes away from retrofire, and we're 2 minutes into the launch. This is only 4 minutes that we're going to be out, really out there into the, before we come back in. Yep. And so we just completed our burn. This over here, these lights are a sequential events. And when things happen that are supposed to happen, like the tower just jettisoned, that's the emergency escape tower. It is now gone. And we're separating from the capsule. I mean, the capsule is separating from the rocket. So now our spacecraft is out there, out of the atmosphere. And if we take a look, and we're automatically, it's going to turn us around retrograde, but we're automatically getting prepared for a retro fire. Separation of capsule. So we're looking at these indicator lights, which they are, and they indicate when things are happening with the yellow, and then after they're complete, they turn green. So the next thing that happened in their sequence would be for the retro to begin retro sequence. Then we need to get in the attitude for retro attitude, which we're kind of working on now, and then fire our retro rockets. In the meantime, we are out in space, outside the Earth's atmosphere and drag, and we're only going to be out there for a very short time because, as you can see, this arc is our flight path. We're launched from the Cape Canaveral, and we're up, up in the upper part of the atmosphere, just kind of getting into the space, and then coming right back down and splashing in the ocean. In the meantime, part of our test flight is to go to manual, and you got to turn off the auto and either go fly-by-wire or go to manual. You can turn these on, and that says manual. In this test, whether you can roll the rocket, and I'm rolling the rocket with my joystick right now. So that roll is good, pitch is good, and yaw is good. But we don't have a lot of time, but we did need to test those. So we're going to set this back to auto, back to normal, and let the capsule do what it's supposed to do. So I'm not going into great detail with this. This is a wonderful program. It's really a simulator. You see, we just got into retrofire. And if we take a look, that means we are coming back down. Now, we were going to come back down anyway because we never went to orbit. But this is a test flight, and we need to test these engines. We need to test retrofire engines, because when we go into orbit with the Mercury capsule using the Atlas rocket instead of the Redstone rocket, we want to know that these things are going to be operational. So this is the truth of all-man spaceflight and all-man flight hardware. When I used to work on a space shuttle program. When I worked on that, anything that went into space was called flight hardware, and it all had to be man-rated. In other words, it had to be on a lot. And there we got retro. We're getting rid of the retro fire pack. The straps that strapped it down are now off, and that test is complete. And you can see that was jettisoned. The retro pack was jettisoned. This scope here was on the very first Mercury mission. That's all they had. There was not a window to look out. There was a little, I think there was a little porthole. But on this mission here, the second and the next Redstone rocket mission did have a window. And you see our altitude is up over 100,000 feet. So we are into space, and you can see the atmosphere is dark. Now we have to get ourselves back into before, as we come back in, we're going to come in with the backside of our capsule bleeding off our speed through the drag of the atmosphere. There's a lot to learn, a lot to look at. It's a really fun adventure. It's really not a game as much as it is a simulator, and it allows you to simulate personally what it was like to be an astronaut then. And we're now hitting the atmosphere as we come back in. And you can see here as we go down the sequence of lighting, we're starting to feel some G's. In fact, we're feeling a lot of it. We were up there at 9. It looked like we were up at 9 G's. I'm sorry, I forgot to look at that. I'm looking at this meter here, the acceleration. So we're quickly slowing down. Now we're down to 3 G's, and it's starting to get a little softer. Take a look outside. You can see whoop. I kind of goofed that. There's a time in the simulator where you go from being out in space to back into the terrestrial environment, and when you're in between those two states, game states, you're not able to look outside, and but eventually we will come into the next game state. And I'm not talking about spacecraft, space flight now. I'm talking about the actual the actual game that we're in, ReEntry. So I'm sorry I didn't let you watch that burn coming through. We come back through the atmosphere like a fireball, and then at some point, as it gets down to normal G's, and you're getting down to 30, you can see the altitude 30,000 feet here. Once we get down to 20,000 feet, the drogue chute will come out, and there it goes. It just came out, and that's a warning light, and you can turn the sound tone off. That's normal for when you come back and you're in the atmosphere. We can look outside now and take a look at how this looks. There's a point here, I need to pull up a checklist, but as we come through, we got the mains are coming out. There we go. And the drogue goes away. So this first flight is a fast flight. It's only about 15 minutes, I think. Take a look at the clock. We're only 10 minutes into the flight. If you can see that clock by my mouse. And at this point, we could pull out that snorkel ring, and I think that allows some pressurization between the outside and the inside to happen. I'm not quite clear on that, but as you come down and about to splash down, you can get some of that. And then also when we're down and the landing bag comes out, I'll show you that. This softens the blow from hitting the water. So you can see there's a lot to learn. And also at this point too, we can pull out this pressure regulator. And I think that allows us to equalize our pressure between the outside and inside the cabin. So a lot of these things over here aren't as vital anymore. So you'll get to know the gauges. There wasn't a lot of fuel being used. There's when I did some manual work testing out the roll, pitch, and rock and all that, I used the manual fuel, but there's the auto fuel that was used during most of the flight. So there's 2 different tanks for that. And you can see it's a fairly simple craft, but even with that, there's a lot to think about, you know. I didn't even get into the power and electrical stuff. Also, at this point, too, you want to get off of UHF. I think you're supposed to switch it over to HF, high frequency, instead of ultra high frequency. We're not too far off for communication with the radio. So there's other things that need to be done during these flights. Like once you go into orbit, you're supposed to turn off some of these circuit breakers. So the Redstone rocket could not get you into orbit, but the Atlas rocket will. And you know, if you get yourself this simulator, you're gonna want to try orbital flight. This is interesting. We actually have an underwater view of it as we're bobbing up and down. So there's a lot up to be had here. You can set failure modes in and test your metal on how good that you can react. I think one of the troubles I have with failure modes is everything happens so fast. I mean, this whole just last 10-12 minutes of this video happened so fast. So many things to talk about, and it just keeps happening as you go down these sequential steps. So it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. It's in, like everything today, is in alpha. And so it's not a full release, but it's certainly operational, and it's continually being worked on. It's not a project that's been dropped. It's a slow roll, but at this point you can fly Mercury, you can fly Gemini missions and Apollo missions, and even land on the moon. So there you have it. Go get yourself a copy, have fun, and we'll catch you next time.